My first guest is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we went from $300 billion to $588 billion to $1 trillion like that. But Karine Jean-Pierre says, we don't have a number to give you at this moment.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's the height of fiscal irresponsibility here. I mean, here's how policy ought to be crafted. The president can come up with ideas, but we send those to Congress to be deliberated, to be discussed, to be debated. We have the Congressional Budget Office, the Office of Management and Budget within the White House. They tell us how much they think these programs are going to cost, and then we decide whether we're going to pass them or not. Here, this process is completely broken, and we're talking about spending up to $1 trillion, but they don't even know. They have no idea, and of course, they have no offsets. They're not going to pay for this with spending cuts, with any claims of tax increases or anything like that. It's this executive power run amok.
Yeah, they say it's paid for. They just don't know how much it costs. So how could it be paid for if you don't know how much it costs?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. What they're trying to claim here is that they've been so fiscally responsible since this administration started January of last year that all of the savings that have accrued will be used to offset the cost of this program. But that's, of course, nonsense. They have been fiscally irresponsible. You look at the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed early last year. That spent $2 trillion completely unoffset. That just went on the nation's credit card. What happened, of course, was there were trillions of dollars in other spending packages that were passed since the onset of the COVID crisis. And those programs terminated. The statute said they would end. They ended. We stopped those programs. They were temporary in nature, so they came off the books, and it made the deficit picture look better in the short term. So by stopped spending money like a drunken sailor, they've continued to spend, but not at quite that clip, and they're claiming that they've accrued a bunch of savings that they can then use to unilaterally spend up to $1 trillion. It's just absolute nonsense.
You know, it's been said by many. It's been said by all of us. You know, the discussion of fairness and equity and equality. If you paid off your student loan, you must feel pretty stupid right now. Not to mention if you joined the military or you didn't get to go to college at all, right? You think about young people who went to the workforce, worked their way up, maybe start a business, take out a loan that you have to pay back. You didn't get those 4 to 6 years of finding yourself and, you know, living amongst your peers, starting in the dorms, going on spring break if you got to go on spring break, all the things that come with going to college. Millions and millions of Americans never got that experience, but now they're going to pay for it, right? I mean, shouldn't we get like an honorary degree or maybe just a tassel for our efforts?
Yeah, about 35% of Americans have a college degree right now. The other 65% of Americans are left out in the cold here. And of course, that doesn't even count the people that you mentioned, people who went to college, who paid off their debt and are now looking back and saying, why the heck did I bother scrimping and saving? Why did I skip out on fancy dinners and vacations so I could afford to pay off my student loans? If I would have just sat there and done nothing, if I would have been delinquent, then I could have gotten $10,000 or $20,000 from the federal government to help me out. That's fundamentally unfair, setting aside the fact that people that do have college degrees tend to have higher earning power than people that do not. So they have the ability, whether they're making over the $250,000 cap currently or they soon will, they're more likely than not to have that higher earning power, particularly if they went to and got an advanced degree like an MBA, a JD, or a med school degree. They are much more likely then to be able to make that money in the long term and do the responsible thing and pay off that debt.
You know, one of the things I've been hearing some of the Democrat commentariats say, well, a lot of these people are performing functions like primary educator or social worker, or they've gone into some kind of government service. Well, first of all, a lot of this debt is held by people that went to public universities. So if there are state or local, entities that need these people, need these degrees, there should be an offset from their budget, right? I mean, why should the federal government be parachuting in when people who work for the state, who are educated by the state, ran up debt with the state? That should be amongst the military does that, right? You join the military, you serve in the military pays your bills. This should be the model now, that if a state or a city or a county needs more social workers, or if we're defunding the police, we need more mental health professionals. If they want to extend an opportunity to study in this subject matter and then say, okay, now you got to sign a contract like the military. You've got to work for this agency that paid your tab for 8, 10, 12 years or whatever it is. Then you're free to move on. That would solve a lot of this problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, reimbursement programs for college make a lot of sense for these workers. If they need people with college degrees, then sure, help them pay for those loans, pay off those loans. But here's the other thing that's really missing from this plan, and this can happen at the state level and the federal level. In fact, it should happen at both, is making college more affordable. Where is the component of this plan that will drive down college costs, that will make it more affordable for working class families to send their children to college? It doesn't exist. In fact, if anything, this could drive up the cost of college by making the expectation that the federal government is going to provide future bailouts more likely. So colleges can raise their tuition and effectively capture those federal bailout dollars in the process. So people are more likely to take on more debt, do so in an irresponsible fashion. Colleges are more likely to charge higher amounts for tuition under a plan like this. We need cost containment. We need to make sure college tuition is more affordable. Biden administration simply isn't doing it.
Yeah, well, maybe some of these colleges ought to drop some of their useless electives like gender equity for freshmen or something like that. I mean, you could probably cut college down to 3 years. I mean, let's be honest, part of your freshman year is almost like high school grade 13, right? And a lot of it's indoctrination courses. If you cut that stuff out, did some of the universal education stuff and went right into your major, you could probably be out in 3 years and have 25% of the cost gutted right there. I got to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.